adjusting his tuxedo as my parents stood behind him, looking everywhere but at me. We were standing in the lobby of the grand venue, and his words felt like a physical slap to the face. Just 3 months ago, I had gifted him a beautiful house worth $770,000 so he and his demanding bride could start their lives debt-free. Now, at his wedding venue, my own mother was telling me I wasn't welcome because I didn't fit their elite guest list appearance. They thought they were humiliating me, leaving me out in the cold while they celebrated inside. What they didn't know was that my lawyer was already on standby. While the wedding music was playing, I didn't cry. Instead, I made a single phone call to execute a legal loophole they completely overlooked. I sold the house right out from under them. My name is Eleanor, and I am 30 years old. If you had told me a year ago that I would be completely dead to my own family, I would have laughed. I spent my entire 20s working 80-hour weeks, climbing the corporate ladder, and sacrificing my social life to build a career I could be proud of. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Julian, lived life on easy mode. He was the golden child, coddled by our parents who constantly bailed him out of financial disasters. When Julian announced his engagement to Vanessa, a woman with a champagne taste and a beer budget, my parents practically begged me to help them set the couple up for success. Wanting to be the supportive older sister, I did the unthinkable. I used my hard-earned savings to purchase a stunning, modern home worth $770,000 as a pre-wedding gift. I thought it would bring us closer. Instead, the moment the keys were in their hands, the entitlement kicked in. Vanessa began treating me like an annoying contractor, refusing to let me visit her property because my corporate aesthetic didn't match the bohemian vibe she was curating. Julian just stood by, nodding along with his fiancée, completely forgetting who actually paid for the roof over his head. They didn't show a shred of genuine gratitude. They simply viewed my life's savings as their birthright. On the day of the wedding, I arrived at the grand venue wearing a classic, elegant navy dress. I felt proud, holding a small card with a heartfelt message, ready to celebrate my brother's new beginning. But as I walked up to the lobby entrance, Julian and my parents stepped out, blocking my path. Julian looked everywhere but at my eyes, nervously adjusting his tuxedo. "Eleanor," my mother whispered, her voice tight and completely devoid of warmth. "We think it's best if you don't come inside. Vanessa's family has invited some very high society guests today. You just don't fit the elite aesthetic we are going for, and we don't want any awkward corporate tension ruining the vibe." I stared at them, completely paralyzed, waiting for the punchline. But Julian just let out a cold, dismissive laugh. "It's only for the closest family, Eleanor. You understand." The sheer cruelty of it suffocated me. My own parents and brother were discarding me like trash at the front door, hiding me away like a dirty secret while they prepared to party in luxury. They thought they could humiliate me, use my $770,000 gift to secure their high society status, and then lock me out of their lives completely. Before we continue to what I did next, I'm incredibly curious about Let me know which city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far my story has reached. As I turned my back on the venue, the tears in my eyes instantly dried up, replaced by a freezing, calculated rage. They wanted an elite image? I was about to give them a reality check. I sat alone in my car in the dimly lit corner of the parking lot, the muffled sound of the wedding music mocking me from the grand hall. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from sadness anymore. It was pure, unadulterated fury. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus, my trusted real estate attorney. When he answered, I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Marcus, I need to know the exact status of the deed transfer for the $770,000 property I bought for Julian." There was a brief pause, followed by the familiar clacking of a keyboard on the other end. After a few agonizing moments, Marcus let out a sharp sigh. "Eleanor, you're not going to believe this, but the final structural deed transfer paperwork is still sitting on my desk. Julian never showed up to sign it. I emailed him 3 separate reminders, but it seems he completely blew them off." Two grueling years after that initial, terrifying diagnosis, I stood in my doctor's office waiting for the results of my final scan. My heart pounded against my ribs as he walked in, but this time, a wide smile broke across his face. He looked at me and delivered the most beautiful words I had ever heard in my entire life. I was completely cancer-free. The heavy cloud of sickness that had dominated my youth was finally gone. Before I tell you how my father suddenly crawled back into my life after, I can see how far the story of survival has reached. With a completely clean bill of health, I made the conscious decision to wash my hands of the past entirely. I formally cut off all contact with my toxic family, blocking their phone numbers and removing them from my social media accounts. I started fresh. I landed a fantastic new job, moved into a beautiful, sunlit apartment of my own, and began decorating it exactly the way I wanted. I built a vibrant network of true, loyal friends who actually valued my existence. I was no longer just surviving. I was finally flourishing independently, proving to myself that I could build a magnificent life entirely on my own terms. One evening, while I was sitting on my sofa enjoying a quiet dinner, my phone suddenly began to vibrate against the coffee table. I reached over to pick it up, expecting it to be a call from one of my friends planning our weekend get-together. Instead, my heart stopped for a beat as I stared down at the screen. After 2 years of absolute, unbroken silence, my father's name was flashing right there in front of my eyes. A wave of old memories washed over me, but I kept my composure, took a deep breath, and answered it. The moment I pressed the receiver to my ear, I didn't hear the cold, arrogant voice I remembered so vividly. Instead, I heard the sound of heavy, breathless sobbing. My father was weeping uncontrollably on the other end of the line. Once he finally managed to catch his breath, he revealed that he was facing a severe, sudden medical crisis of his own that had severely limited his physical mobility and left him completely desperate. As the conversation went on, the real truth behind his unexpected call finally spilled out, and it highlighted the ultimate family betrayal. He explained that my younger sister, Daphne, the precious golden child whose luxury wedding had completely eclipsed my fight for life, had completely refused to help him or let him move into her guest house because she claimed it would utterly ruin her upscale lifestyle. My parents had exhausted all their savings on her lavish wedding, and now they had absolutely nothing left. He explicitly told me that he expected me to pack up my things, move back into their house, and become his full-time, live-in caregiver because, as he put it, I already knew what it was like to be sick. I sat there in the quiet of my living room, listening to the man who had abandoned me when I was at my absolute lowest point. The sheer audacity of his entitlement was staggering. He didn't ask how I was doing, he didn't apologize for the years of neglect, and he didn't express an ounce of remorse for leaving me to face a deadly disease completely alone. Instead, he simply switched his demands from Daphne to me, explicitly telling me that it was my moral duty as his oldest daughter to completely forgive the past, forget what they did, and come take care of him now that he needed it. As his demanding words echoed through the speaker, I felt an incredible, overwhelming wave of calm wash over me. The old, painful anger that used to keep me awake at night simply melted away, replaced by the profound realization that the power dynamic had completely shifted. I was no longer the helpless, broken girl begging for her father's love and protection. I was a strong, fully independent survivor who held every single card in her hand. I waited patiently for him to finish his frantic, desperate pitch, refusing to let any trace of bitterness or rage dictate the tone of my voice. I took one long, slow, deep breath, letting the silence stretch between us until he finally stopped talking, waiting breathlessly for my compliance. Then, with total clarity and unmatched confidence, I delivered the devastating, precise forward response that completely shattered his fragile ego and left him utterly speechless on the line. Call your favorite daughter. I hung up before he could say another word. Hanging up that phone brought me a sense of absolute, profound peace that I hadn't felt in years. I knew with total certainty that I had made the right decision, refusing to break my hard-won boundaries for the very people who had entirely discarded me at my absolute lowest point. I later found out through an old family acquaintance that my father had to rely on basic state assistance for his care, while Daphne blocked his number entirely to protect her own comfort. Do you think I was too cruel by turning my back on my father when he was sick, or did he get exactly what he deserved after abandoning me during my cancer treatment? Put the next video on your screen for another wild story of